Shalom, welcome. I'm Rabbi Robin Frisch, and this is the Mazel Pups podcast. If you're Jewish or Jewish, however you define that, then this is the podcast for you. I am so excited to be back for the second episode with our guest, Kevin Osborn. Kevin served in the U.S. military. He was in the Iowa Army National Guard with 2 deployments and 2.5 years of active duty service. He was honorably discharged as a sergeant, and he currently works as a senior veteran service representative for the Department of Veterans Affairs in Pennsylvania. He has over 9 years of service with the VA. And very importantly, we also have here, we can see he's very stressed, Eddie, his dog, who has been resting. He rested during the last episode. I see his eyes are open, and he is lying here now, and he is just the cutest dog, although that's not what is important about him, but it's a nice bonus that he's adorable. So it's a pleasure, Kevin, to have you here. And thank you again for being here again. And thank you for bringing Eddie with you. Eddie, thank you for being here. Hopefully we won't disturb your rest. And actually, I want to begin by asking about Eddie's vest. Eddie is wearing a vest. Does that change how I should be interacting with him, for example?
It absolutely does. When he's got his vest on, and for him to know too, he knows he's working, and that should be important for other people to realize that he's working as well. It might not look like he's really doing anything right now, but for a complete stranger to come up and to start to pet him or do googly eyes, whatever you want to do that will take his attention away. And it might not seem like it, but his attention's focused on me right now. He's actually laying on my right foot or right up against it. So I'm sure if I were to suddenly move, he would jump up right away, although he's pretty relaxed right now. But yeah, so the relationship between a service dog handler and just a normal pet owner is completely different, because he needs to be aware of me and focused on me. And I mean, what my needs are, or what my needs could be. So it's absolutely okay to come up to somebody with a service dog and ask them about it. Although some people might not want to talk, they might not be okay with it. I'm very supportive of education about service animals or service dogs. And so I'm happy to explain the difference. I'm happy to say hi to people. It's actually one of the kind of side perks of having him is I don't normally talk to strangers. I'm not good at starting conversations, or at least I don't think so. My wife would tell you differently. But at a restaurant, for example, we were waiting to have to get a table, and there were 3 little boys that walked past us to go to the bathroom, and they were eyeing him the whole time, and I could see. And they saw the vest, and the vest says, "Please don't pet me, I'm working." And they went back to their table, and then a few minutes later, they came over with their mother, and the mother asked me, "Can we say hi to your dog?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I got down with them, and Eddie will sit, he'll shake, he'll look for me for a treat after he shakes, because he knows that should be coming from me.
So no one else should give him a treat, or at least not without your permission.
Yeah. If the handler gives you permission, then it's okay. But the thing is, the relationship is different versus a regular dog. So right. I had my lab that we've talked about, Jersey, and one of the ways to show affection with her that people know is just to give her a treat when they see her, which, like, sure, she deserves that. But if you were to say I come in to sit with you and you give Eddie a treat, and then, okay, I don't say anything, and then I come in another time and Eddie might start to look for you for a treat, but I start to have some issues. He's going to be busy looking at you for a treat because he's a dog. I don't blame him. Treats are yummy. But he's not going to be paying attention to me the way that he should have. And so the relationship is just different with a service dog, especially when they're wearing a vest. Another example that I can give you is we went to see Brett Goldstein in Philadelphia, the Roy Kent from Ted Lasso, if you're familiar with that. So he did a show in Philadelphia. My wife and I went to see him. We went to a restaurant beforehand. Eddie comes with me everywhere I go when we're in those situations. Totally fine at the restaurant. Nobody gave us a hard time. And then we went to the theater, and I was really happy because one of the workers at the theater asked me 2 questions they can ask you. They said, "Is this a service animal?" I said, "Yes." I mean, even though it says
I was going to say, just read.
right, it says it on the vest,
But, okay,
but he's
careful.
able to do that. He's able to ask me, "Is this a service animal?" He's also able to ask me, "Is this dog trained, or what tasks is this dog trained to do?" And so I can just I can give a high level overview of what it is. I don't have to have the dog demonstrate anything. I don't want to be put on display like that. But as we were walking into the theater, and it was very frustrating because it's a packed theater. People are trying to get to their seats. And we walked past, a woman reached down and just pet him while we were walking past. Didn't acknowledge me, didn't say anything. And so it was kind of one of those things where, like, I immediately just felt this burst of rage, because it invaded my space, and it invaded his space, and, like, it's not okay to do that sort of thing. So it's okay to come up and say hi, but just be kind of aware of how the handler
Right.
is.
They should really go through the handler, not the dog.
Exactly.
I mean, in
exactly.
reality, I have 2 dogs. We've talked about that personally.
Right.
If I'm walking my dog, someone for their own safety are they nice? Are they
Right.
okay? One of them has a lot of anxiety.
Right.
He probably doesn't, I know he doesn't want someone coming up, especially he's scared of males for some reason.
Right.
And, he may have been abused in his first few months by a male, though the vet said maybe not. Maybe
Right.
some dogs are just like that. But if some guy comes up, which has happened, and just tries to pet him and he's not even a service animal, it makes him really upset.
Right.
So I think in general, people need to be more respectful of dogs. But certainly with a service animal, there's a whole nother layer of the need for respect, especially, when they have on their vest. They should know that. But let me ask you mentioned that he's on your leg. Is that coincidence or is that intentional, so he can kind of rest, but if there's something that makes you anxious, he would know?
It's definitely a little bit of both. He's my first golden retriever, and, like, I would consider him a Velcro dog. So, like, whenever I sit down any place, like, even if I sit on the couch with my kids, and we're watching TV, he will come up and he'll lean his head up against me, and it's just a natural instinct to pet him, which is okay. Or, I mean, he'll come up and start, like, just licking my legs or whatever. But he always has to be touching me. And I don't think that that's necessarily trained into him as himself. That's just how he is, especially as a golden retriever. But as I had said before, I guarantee, like, if I start bouncing my knee or I get up quickly or something like that, he's going to shoot right up. But he is trained. One of the tasks that he's actually trained to do is to, if I call him, he will come up and place his head on my knee and just look at me. And it's basically just to kind of help ground you a little bit and just kind of help give you something to focus on as a handler. And it's great because he loves being pet, and it also kind of helps with any potential issues you might have. So
if I ask you any really hard questions, he'll jump up. I won't stress you out. He traveled obviously here with you today, the drive from home, but I know he's traveled further with you and gone to different places with you, or, even you mentioned restaurants, different places locally. Where can he go with you, or can you tell us about some of your travel experiences with him?
So his actual own travel himself, I knew he flew up here from Raleigh, North Carolina, from his puppy raiser, Nancy's place. But so when I got him, he came back with me in the car. And as a service animal, he's allowed to go with me pretty much anywhere. And one way to look at it is pretty much any place that pays taxes. So like a house of worship, for example, he's not technically allowed to go into a church or a synagogue or something like that. that doesn't mean that he can't. For example, we had, and I can't remember exactly why we went, but there was a synagogue service that my wife and kids and I went to, and me knowing what the law was, I had called the rabbi ahead of time, and he was so welcoming. I said, like, hey, listen, this is Eddie's a PTSD service dog. The synagogue's going to be super crowded. Like, I would really like to bring him, but I respect your decision if you say no. And he was all for it.
Good.
Asked me about him a little bit. And so Eddie came with me to service, or to services at the synagogue. The person in front of us did turn around and ask me if he was a service animal. I said yes. And
I guess they didn't see his vest.
He was wearing the vest, but she also asked me, like, what's he trained to do? So she might have known those two ADA questions that people are allowed to. Well, I mean, she wasn't really allowed to ask as a civilian. I say civilian, but wasn't really allowed to ask as a bystander, but she may have had some function within the synagogue. I don't know, but I politely answered, and that was the end of it. So he's been there. He's been to Iowa with me a couple of times, back to see my family and friends. He's flown on a plane with me. He did the drive with me, all 18 hours of it. 36, I guess, if you include coming back. He also came with me when my sister was in New York. We drove up to Trenton. He rode the train with me from Trenton to Newark, and then he rode the subway with me to get into the city. So he's been on pretty much I take that back. We haven't been on like a boat or a ferry or anything, but
not yet.
Exactly. So my wife's family used to enjoy cruises, and so he actually would be allowed. I'm pretty sure I'd have to research a little bit more, but he should be allowed on a cruise ship too. I need to know the specifics, but
you know what this is making me think of? We're trying to figure out, we want to go to the beach with friends for a week, and we want to, if I'm going to go just, to the beach somewhere local, I want to take my dogs. I feel like that's vacation. I'm always working, and I work from home, but they basically sit around and watch me work all day with a few breaks. And, it'd be fun to just go away with them. And we've done this before. And so they've got one dog. We have two. We need to find an Airbnb that takes 3 dogs, within a month from now. Not easy in the summer. So we've been looking at places. But what I love is on Airbnb, it says, do you have, I always say I want pets, and it says how many, but it always says if this is a service animal, I'm not using the right language, but like you don't even need to check it.
Right.
Like that's one of those things that's just covered. No one can. It's not even any of their business if you're bringing a dog. Right. They can't complain about you're bringing a dog. That's a given. Now, our 3 pets is a different thing, but.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that, because actually a couple of weeks ago, my wife was looking into us going to Long Beach Island, and I think she had looked at a couple different travel places like Airbnb or whatever's out there. And she was emailing back and forth with somebody, and they wanted to charge a pet fee for Eddie and wanted to charge a higher cleaning fee, which under the Americans with Disability,
right?
it's
if
not,
you bring your other dog, they can. But
and so when Kayla responded with that, we didn't hear back, which was unfortunate. But yeah, so, and that also brings up another situation. So we went to Iowa last summer for a friend's wedding, and I booked everything at a hotel, and I don't tell them that there's a pet, because Eddie's not a pet. Right. Under the law, he's considered a medical device. And when I went to check in, the hotel worker said, like, after I got everything lined up for the room, and she said, and just one pet. And I said, no, he's not a pet, he's a service animal. And she said, well, we have to charge a fee for any pets in the room. And I said, again, he's not a pet, he's a service animal, he's covered under the ADA. There shouldn't be any pet fee or any cleaning fee. And she said, I'm just telling you what I was trained. And at that point I was just like, okay, it's fine. Like, I understand you're just doing your job. I'm not taking it out on her, because I think it's a lack of knowledge. It's a lack of education. And so I just paid the pet fee at that point. And then I got back to the room, and the more I thought about it, the more it actually started to upset me. And I called my wife and talked to her a little bit about it. And she's like, well, like, you can handle the situation however you want to handle it. And so I ended up, I went back to the front desk. I said, hey, like, is there a manager on duty that I can talk to about this? And the manager wasn't working that day, which I totally think is okay. Or, I mean, obviously it was okay. But I did go back to the room and I emailed the manager, and I included, and it's about educating people, but doing it respectfully. So like if I had started to turn into this monster and started screaming at it doesn't do anybody any good. But so I had emailed the manager, and I included a couple links as far as like the hotel industry and like what they're allowed to charge and what they're not. And sent the email. And then the next day I saw the manager, and she hadn't gotten the chance to read the email yet, but I explained it to her, and she was so sympathetic or so apologetic. And the end of the day, they ended up taking the charge off, and it was something where having to explain that difference and just educating somebody in the difference, like the difference between a pet or a dog as a pet and as an emotional support animal and as a service dog. Like those are three distinct different variations, I guess. So Eddie is a service dog. He is trained in performing specific tasks. He's not, I mean, it might seem like it, but he's not here just to make me feel good and relax. Like he's actually, if I ask him to do a few things, he will do them.
So what you mentioned, the pet, emotional support dog, service dog, it's exactly where I want to go now. And I actually want to read, really for everyone else's sake, since you already know about this, how you and I reconnected actually through the Mazel Pups Facebook group, something I had posted. I actually was in Sarasota, Florida with my daughter, and I was out to dinner one night, and I took a picture of a sign I saw there that at first kind of bothered me. Right. We will talk about how I didn't fully understand what it meant, and I've learned, and I'm proud of what I've learned, and that's how you have to be open to learning from others. But here's what it said. I did not have any dog with me. I was just out to dinner with my cousin. But here's what the sign said. We love your pets, just not in our restaurant. Please know that we and the health department ask that only service animals that are trained to perform a task to aid a person with a disability be allowed. Then below that it said, emotional support animals are not permitted. And I got not really upset, but it bothered me. Why aren't emotional support animals admitted into this restaurant? That's terrible. So I took a picture of the sign and I posted it in the Mazel Pups Facebook group. And I wrote under it, I understand that pets aren't allowed, of course, in restaurants, but I'm upset that emotional support animals aren't allowed. And I look a day or two later, and I all these comments on it. And I'm like, it's a sign. Like I didn't post a picture of like some super cute dog in Florida. It was literally just a sign. And I started reading through the comments, and people were explaining to me the difference between an emotional support animal and a service dog, which I didn't fully understand. And then Kevin had written, it was quite long, but really well thought out explanation that really touched me, and is what actually caused me to reach out to you and say, you need to come on my podcast. Like, this is really important, and this is an important issue. And I want other people to understand this now, not that I'm some expert, but now that I have a deeper understanding. Can you tell me how you responded and what you taught me and others from your response to my post?
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of pretty much covered all of it as far as a service animal is trained to do specific tasks to help a person with a disability. Eddie does those things. Maggie, my other dog, you could consider her an emotional support animal where she just helps you feel better being around you. Petting a dog makes you feel better. It helps release oxytocin. That an emotional support animal is not trained to do a specific task if you have a disability. And so when people who aren't knowledgeable of the law will try to bring an emotional support animal into a restaurant, for example, and then they get upset that the dog isn't allowed, it's because of that. It's because of that distinction. sure, you can jump on Amazon and buy a vest and a leash and throw that on your dog and take your dog anywhere with you, but that dog shouldn't be yipping at people. It shouldn't be biting people. It shouldn't be scrounging on the floor for food, any of that sort of thing. It might make you feel better while it's with you, but if it's not behaving in public, it shouldn't really be in public that way.
But even if it is a really well-behaved emotional support animal, like it's okay not to let it in the restaurant, according to the ADA,
Right?
And it's with Disabilities Act. And I think that's what's kind of hit me is like, I don't hear you saying emotional support animals aren't important. They can be incredibly important for people. And as you said, I think your other dog really probably serves that role in many ways. And certainly Jerseys serve that role as well, but they are not trained animals that someone really perhaps can't go out without them and is not able to go out into public and won't be able to have the comfortable experience that they may need a service dog or a guide dog if it's an issue of sight for. And so again, not to in any way undermine their importance, but to understand that there is a tremendous difference.
Right. And it's something like, I mean, we go back to Jersey. I've got her paw print tattooed on my shoulder. I used to do a bit of blacksmithing. I haven't done it in a few years because of the kids and everything else, but named my blacksmithing Old Dog Forge based on her gray face and her hanging out in the garage while I'm doing blacksmithing. But yeah, the thought did cross my mind to get a vest, to put a vest on her, to bring her with me. But she was an emotional support animal. She helped me feel better. Granted, she got me through some very intense situations or intense feelings, but she wasn't trained to do any tasks to help with the PTSD sort of thing. So.
Well, thank you. And again, I mean, for me, it was it is something I should have known, but that I didn't fully understand. And I'm very grateful for that.
It's something where a lot of people, they don't make that distinction. And I know, like housing, for example, like you may be allowed to have an emotional support animal. They may say no pets, but you can go online and pay a couple bucks and somebody will mail you a certificate or email you a certificate or whatever. But yeah, it's just about people being educated and knowing that difference. And I love dogs. That's the reason that I'm on here. That's the reason that I follow Mazel Pups on Facebook. But I don't devalue people's relationships with their dogs either. I think everybody should have a dog, but some dogs shouldn't be allowed to go someplace.
It's different to be there's people with allergies. There's all kinds of things if you have too many of them.
That's something I don't know that I've mentioned. Like I'm very aware of with Eddie. He's got longer hair. He tends to shed. On our first flight to Iowa, actually, the first person we sat next to, I said, like, he might lay on your feet. I'm very, very sorry. He's trained to go in the tiny little area in front of me. Usually he'll lay and put his head on my lap. And he was fine, the guy that I sat next to. But then on our connecting flight, we sat next to somebody else, and it may have been a cultural thing, but she was deathly afraid of dogs, or it doesn't even have to be a cultural thing. It just, any person could be afraid of dogs. And he's a huge teddy bear, but I don't want him to get into somebody else's space. I don't want somebody else to feel uncomfortable because he's there. And so I mentioned this before. To me, the biggest compliment whenever we go anywhere is hearing somebody say, I didn't even know there was a dog in here. Yeah. So he's with me. He does his work. Nobody else needs to know he's there. And then when we leave, nobody knows that he was even there in the first place. It's a great thing to hear that. So one of the actual tasks Eddie's trained to do is he's trained to basically come from a heel position and just stand in front of me. And that creates a physical barrier. We went to a wedding. I can't think of the name of the place that it was, but the cocktail hour was in this tiny little, like, older bar area, and it, like, my claustrophobia was just kind of starting to get to me right away. And one of the things that he did was just stood in front of me, and it created a physical barrier so that people couldn't get quite as close to me and I didn't feel as cagey. He's also trained to turn and face backwards on the other side. And this might not seem like a big deal, but say I'm standing in line at a bank and I get anxious when somebody gets behind me and gets too close. Well, service animal, or in this situation, he's trained to face backwards, and he sees somebody walking up, his tail naturally starts to wag a little bit.
So there's no space for them right behind you? Or
Part of it is a person isn't naturally going to get too close to a dog. The other part of it is his tail is giving me a visual cue that, hey, somebody's coming up behind you. And that kind of helps me just kind of be aware of that, and I can turn around and see what's going on. But yeah, it's twofold in a situation like that. But going back to it and the economic thing, if you can't afford to buy a dog, or you can't afford to pay for a program or something like that, that doesn't mean that you, like, all is lost. There's not an opportunity there. Like, a very, very well behaved dog with good temperament and stuff like that, you can train tasks to help you with your disability. So,
but they legally can't get a vest.
Well,
I mean, they wouldn't be.
So that's the gray area too. With each organization has a different vest. There's no standard vest for a service dog. Even the organization that I got him through, they have a vest that has 2 of the underbelly straps. They've got multiple different colors. But you can buy just a regular vest on Amazon and, like, slap a Velcro patch on it that says service dog. Honestly, if you're training it yourself, if you want to do that stuff, you can, but you don't have to. It helps in social situations to identify your dog as a service dog, but you don't have to throw the patches on and that sort of thing. Like, your dog should be well behaved with you. It should be helping you out. And a business owner or whoever in that business can come up. They can ask you, is this a service animal? Because if you say no, it's an emotional support animal. Well, sorry, you can't come in with the dog. But is this a service animal? Yes, it is. What tasks is this animal trained to help with? Or what tasks is this animal trained to do? And that's really it. So if you're from a low income family or whatever, you need a service dog, you can get yourself a dog, you can train it yourself. And I mean, you can get a letter from your physician saying you need one, that sort of stuff. But ultimately what it comes down to is a well-behaved dog that's trained to do a few things in public.
So you've said this a lot, but I'm just going to ask if you could say in a sentence or two, what is the impact that Eddie's had on your life?
My family, my wife and kids notwithstanding, like, Eddie has made me feel as normal as possible, as whole as possible. With him, I'm able to go places with my kids and enjoy things with my kids. That's way more than a sentence. I just
That's okay.
realized.
I wasn't going to stop you.
Okay.
I'm not very strict. You see how my lightning round takes like 20 minutes.
Right.
Anything else you want people to know about you or Eddie or service dogs?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's so important. If in my situation, if you're not feeling quite right, if you think that you would benefit from talking to somebody, if you're in any type of distress, like, reach out, because people do care, and there are so many people out there that want to help you, that want to care about you, and so many different organizations that can help with service animals if that's what you need. But you don't need a service animal. You just the dog itself, the unconditional love, the sense of purpose, all of that. If that's enough to keep you going, that's great. Just reach out, get help if you need help, and just keep your head down and keep moving.
I have to say, you make me so happy that I went to that restaurant in Sarasota a few weeks ago. I don't normally take pictures of signs and then post them on Facebook,
Right.
especially if they're going to show my ignorance, which I didn't realize it would. But I am thrilled that I did. And it's been so nice to reconnect with you, but it's also been so amazing. I'm so glad that I got you, not just for one, but for 2 episodes of Mazel Pups to, again, to educate me, to educate our listeners, to hear your story, which is so important, to realize that, veterans come home and they might be acting fine, but they're carrying a lot with them.
Right.
And we need to be sensitive to that, both as a country and as individuals. We also need to be really grateful to you. And again, as I said in the beginning of last episode, thank you so much for your service to our country. And, your story reminds us that your service to our country isn't just the time that you're serving, but it's something that you carry with you probably the rest of your life.
Right.
I'm incredibly grateful. And I am also incredibly grateful to all of our listeners who, without you, we wouldn't have a podcast. So thank you for listening to Mazel Pups, and keep coming back. We've got lots more interesting episodes ahead. And please check us out on social media. And we'll see you soon. Lehitraot. Bye.
Hello, shalom friends. I'm Bo, one of Rabbi Robin's dogs and our original Mazel Pup. If you enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a pawesome 5-star rating, and follow us on social media. Thanks for listening.